Hello, welcome to Ron's Living Room. Oh, Ron's T-Bone Shed. So I was feeling kind of mid-board today. See the Superman shirt? That's to celebrate the fact that I sold an old Super, or a Super Olds, within minutes of posting it today. And I got to thank a gentleman out in Massachusetts for buying it so quickly. So Super, for an old Super. So when I'm saying I'm feeling kind of mid-board today, I figured I've got these mid-boards and I haven't done a video on them. So we're going to do straight tenor mid-bores. We're not going to do trigger mid-bores because trigger mid-bores would require me to own a 3B plus, which I do, but not operational. It would also require me to own like a Conn, I think like a 79H is the mid-bore trigger. Don't have one of those. It would require me to own a Reynolds Onyx. Okay, I've got one of those, but it's got a trigger. So we're not doing triggers tonight. Let's take a look at what we're looking at right now. So here's the setup in the living room. We have 1, 2, 3 Reynolds, 1, 2 Conns, and what's the mystery horn here? This is the Martin MAGNA. Every time I say Magna, I can't help thinking of Mike Myers and Austin Powers saying magma, but it's MAGNA. So let's do some introductions here. Let's talk about the Martin MAGNA. I recently got this in. It kind of completes my Martin collection. I don't have any Martin trigger horns. I know they made a Magna bass, but this Magna, Martin MAGNA, was produced in 1969, and it's a 524 bore. Now, whether that's what it says on paper or not, that's what my calipers told me. So 524, which is very close to other mid bores. Like the, I believe the Conn 50H, that's the other mid-bore. That's a 525. The Bach 36, I don't have. I don't own a straight Bach 36. I only have the trigger Bach 36. So next one up here with the rose brass bell. This is the Conn 74H Artist. I put all these blankets because I was trying to create less noise in the video, but you can still see all the junk popping up behind it. So the 74H Artist was produced sometime between 1974 and 1983. I can't seem to place the serial number on it. The next one is a much newer horn. This one was made in 1983. This is the Conn Century, or the 76H. And that's it's another mid-bore. What a lot of these mid-bores have in common is they all have 8.5-inch bells. And they're all in the 520 bore range. Next one up here. Part of Reynolds Artist line. It's the Contempora. Now, later in the 60s, they made a Contempora that wasn't a mid-bore. It was a 500 with a 7.5-inch bell. But this is pretty much the original design here. And it's kind of interesting when you look at it. Okay, let's look at this one. Okay, so the Contempora, the Reynolds Argenta, and the Reynolds HiFi. All right, all three, same bore. Basically same build dimensions. It's just something's a little different amongst all of them. That counterweight you're looking at here, I added that, okay, because it's kind of front heavy. So interesting thing about Reynolds, we know that F.A. Reynolds, he worked for H.N. White King for about 16 years. So when he designed his Model 70 Professional, which I still have up for sale on Reverb and Facebook Marketplace, and I don't know why anybody's not biting because it is a fantastic tenor. That horn initially was designed more like the H.N. White King horns. But when you look here at the Argenta, of course, F.A. Reynolds and Olds, they were very good and old friends. This one tracks much more of the Super Olds, because I just had this up the other day. Very much the same thing, except for the fact that the slide is brass with nickel sleeves at the top. It's nickel from the tenon screw all the way across the top until you hit the red brass bell. And then you get all the way down there and you have the nickel garland or nickel krantz. Okay. Almost exactly like the old Super, except the dimensions are very different. The Super has a dual bore 45-500 bore fluted slides and a 7.5-inch bell. This is an 8.5-inch bell at a 520 bore. Now, so like I said, some of the later ones are smaller. The Argenta, basically same design, same dimensions. What makes the Argenta different? The Argenta doesn't just look nickel or silver. It is solid nickel silver. Solid nickel. Okay, so this is not plating. This is solid stuff. And the whole idea behind having the 3 different horns, the Contempora with the red brass, which will be warmer sound, the Argenta with solid nickel, and we all nickel, nickel makes things bright and speedy. And then we have the HiFi, which is yellow brass. So it's going to fall somewhere between the two, where yellow brass isn't as bright and punchy as nickel, and it's not as warm as red brass, or this is basically what they call their bronze. Red brass bronze bell. So the idea behind basically designing 3 horns with different metals is for different tonal response. This one's more standard, yellow brass, with a lot of nickel fittings on it. Nickel sleeves at the top of the slide, just like the Contempora. Okay, no nickel on the slides at the bottom. Okay, nickel hand brace. This one does not have a nickel gooseneck, nor a nickel tuning crook. This is all yellow brass. Of course, the Argenta, we just talked about this, solid nickel. We come over here to the Contempora, mixture of bronze, red brass bronze, nickel, yellow brass, nowhere to be found. And that's going to give you a much warmer tone. So then let's move back over here to the Conn. So this Conn here is older. It's an older model. And the metals that they use on it are more along the lines of the 8H or the 88H, which is the red brass, the yellow crook, nickel crook at the bottom. That's very much a signature of Conn. We come over here to the 76, the Century, the 76H, nickel crook, right, which would indicate that it's a professional level horn. Nickel sleeves at the top of the slide. Nice healthy nickel sleeves up here in the tuning. And then the yellow brass down to the 8.5-inch bell. That has a pretty warm sound too. I've played this one before, but you can see the difference here is the top of the body on this one is your standard wide Conn body shape. You go straight up the gooseneck. It's not curved through the tuning slide and then down through the bell. You look at this one. This is a little bit more of a narrow body. It does angle. The gooseneck does angle from the bottom of the bell brace all the way up to the tuning slide. And the tuning slides are not interchangeable. So this one is a little bit smaller. And then we get over here to the Magna. The Magna, if you look at that tuning crook, that thing is fat. That is bigger than anything we have out here. I mean, it's bigger than than any of the Reynolds. But that is a thick, fat tuning crook up there. And then these braces are solid. These aren't hollow. That's why there's no counterweight on it. So those braces serve as the counterweight. And I really love that little beveled edge up there on that sleeve. And you get down here to the red brass, the 8.5-inch bell. You have the nickel hand grip, the nickel sleeves at the top of the slide, and that's it. It's brass all the way down to the bottom. So let's talk about some of the specifics here. So the Magna, Martin MAGNA, made in 1969, 524 bore, based on my measurements, 8.5-inch bell. The slide weight, the outer slide weight, is 10.5 ounces. This is the heaviest outer slide of all of these trombones. 10.5 ounces. That's pretty heavy. It would probably be a lot more fun if we had one of those carbon fiber slides made for it, But I don't have the $1,200-$1,400 to do that. So, and I don't know if they would just, fashion an outer slide to that. I think they would have to build the entire slide. Okay, so that's got the heaviest slide at 10.5 ounces. But the overall horn is also the heaviest, but not by much, at 3 pounds, 3.4 ounces. So that's a hefty horn. It's almost the same weight and dimensions as a symphonic bore. But these all take small shank mouthpieces. So let's come over here to the Conn 74H Artist, 523 bore, 8.5-inch bell. The outer slide is actually the lightest of all the slides on the mid bores here. So this outer slide is 8.4 ounces, which is, though it's heavy for a small tenor, it's pretty light for a mid bore. The overall weight of the horn is 3 pounds, 1.1 ounces. So the 74H, this one, and this one are the same weight. Now we'll come over here to the 76H Century, 522 bore, made in 1983, 8.6 ounces outer slide, 2 pounds, 14.4 ounces, so almost a 3-pound horn. But this is the lightest of all the horns, being under 3 pounds, which is kind of cool because that basically makes it almost the same weight as a 6H, except it's a bigger horn. Okay, now let's go over here to the Reynolds. So the Contempora we just talked about, that the outer slide on this one is 9.6 ounces. The outer slide on the Argenta is 9.6 ounces, and the outer slide on the HiFi is 9.5 ounces. Give or take a point, you know. They basically all the same weight slide. Okay, now the Contempora is 3 pounds, 1.1 ounces. The Argenta is pretty light here. It's it's almost as light as the 76. It's 2 pounds, 15.2 ounces. For a solid nickel horn. You would think the nickel would be heavier. It's harder, definitely harder, not heavier. And then, of course, we come over here to the HiFi, and the HiFi is outer slide is 9.5 ounces, 3 pounds, 2 ounces. So the lightest horns right now are the Argenta and the 76H Century, that one right there. And the heaviest horn, of course, is the Magna at 3 pounds, 3.4 ounces. And in a close second is the Reynolds HiFi at 3 pounds, 2 ounces. And then in third place is the Conn 74H at 3 pounds, 1.1 ounces, which is the same weight as the Contempora. So yeah, that's kind of cool. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to set up my camera and I'm going to go ahead and play each of these horns so you get a chance to hear what they all sound like on my Samsung phone recorder. Okay, here we go. We're going to do a little sampling play on each of these mid-bore horns. I'm going to use 2 different mouthpieces. Mid-bores are known to be versatile, right? You can play them for concert or you can play them for jazz, depending on what part you're playing jazz. And I know some people that play the mid-bores up on lead. Martin MAGNA on the Shilke 51D. Very, very dark and warm. Of course, the Shilke contributes a lot to that. All right, we're going to use switching Shilkes. We're going to go to the 50C4, Shilke 50C4, a little smaller, a little shallower, and then I'll do polka dots and moonbeams. I don't know, still doesn't sound right up there with the shallower mouthpiece. I suppose if I had iron chops, I could play that on a 51D. Right, next horn up. Okay, now we're going to do the 74H Artist with the 51D on I Can't Get Started. Got a warm tone too. Not as much color and body as the Magna, because I think the Magna is just a bigger horn, thicker, heavier horn. Okay, now we're going to go to the Shilke 50C4 on polka dots and moonbeams. It's a little better up there for this mouthpiece. Okay, let's go to the Century 76H. We're going to do I Can't Get Started on the 76H Century. It's a post-Elkhart product of Conn's. Here we go on the 51D. Very nice. You know, the beginning sound just a lot alike, with very, very subtle differences. Okay, now polka dots and moonbeams on the Shilke C4, so Shilke 50 C4. The good thing about vibrato is if you hit it early enough, then you can fix some of the intonation problems. Anyway, still a little bright up there. It could be the weakness in my chops, but a little easier to play up there on the 76H could just be the Conn construction. Okay, we're going to move on to the Reynolds now. Okay, we're going to start with the Reynolds HiFi. And again, I added the counterweight. It doesn't come with a horn, or it would be really front heavy if I didn't. And, you know, these Reynolds have this slightly larger receiver here. I mean, this goes right down, snug right into there. It's not big enough to be a Euro shank, and it's larger than a standard small shank. So, okay, excuse me, I Can't Get Started, Gershwin. Here we go. I have to fill this horn up a lot more than I did the other three. Just could be the Reynolds. It's just an older horn, thicker metal, and it's actually the smallest of all the bores at 520. But man, it doesn't feel like it's a small bore. It feels like a 547. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and take my life in my hands and try to play polka dots and moonbeams on the 50 C4. I got to struggle a lot more to play up there, but I didn't have to really fight the tone so much. Could be that the horn is heavier. It just seemed to center a little bit easier, a little higher up on this than the other three. Okay, we're going to move on to the Contempora. Certainly warm, very warm because of the bronze bell. Very warm. Okay, now for polka dots and moonbeams. Interestingly enough, this responded way better up high than all the rest of them for a big horn. I don't know why, it just did. It came out easier, a little freer. I mean, I'm still having to push because it's a kind of it's a 5. It's a large mouthpiece, and I'm playing up near the top, of the high B flat area. Okay, and last but not least, we move on to the Argenta. So you would think that the warmer horn, Contempora, would struggle more in the upper register, but it didn't. I think it's because the horn's lighter and the bell is thinner than the others. It's not quite as heavy, especially not as heavy as the Magna. Okay, I Can't Get Started on the solid nickel Reynolds Argenta. I do feel a little more clarity because of the hardness of the horn. Okay, switching mouthpieces, going on to polka dots and moonbeams. Felt like I struggled a lot more. I could be getting tired. I can't really judge because of my playing limitations, but this one felt more difficult to play up high as opposed to the Contempora, which felt the easiest to play up high of all of them. They all sounded pretty darn good on the Shilke 51D, in my opinion. The Conns were a little bit brighter. The Magna had really fat sound all around and kind of thin in the upper register. And then the Reynolds just seemed to have a more even response for me from bottom to top, from playing I Can't Get Started all the way up to the top of polka dots and moonbeams, with the Argenta being the one that seemed to respond the best, top to bottom, as opposed to the solid nickel or the HiFi. Anyway, so there it is. There's the summary of those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 mid-bore horns that you can see here. Let's take one last look at them. We have the Reynolds HiFi, the all-nickel Argenta, the Reynolds Contempora. So far, my favorite playing of all these. You have the 76H Century, the 74H Artist, and the Martin MAGNA. So each one of these horns is very special in their own way. They have their own unique qualities for certain. And I'm sure with the right piece of music, playing concert band music, playing a standard march, playing the national anthem, a lot of those, or even like, the Armed Forces Salute, some of you may be familiar with, a lot of that mid-range stuff would just come out really nicely in all these. And I think with the right mouthpiece, I didn't test out a whole bunch of mouthpieces for the upper range jazzy stuff, but I did play the, which one was it? I played the HiFi at Bones West last week, and it sounded pretty good. It felt really good, actually, and quite responsive with everything I did. But I was playing the, I think the Irby Green mouthpiece with it, which does give it a bit more zip and response. But there is a right mouthpiece for these. And just to remind everybody, not one mouthpiece fits all. The mouthpiece is the liaison between your mouth and that horn. So finding the right mouthpiece for the horn in you is always important. And that's why a lot of musicians keep a couple mouthpieces, depending on which horn they're playing. Now, I don't know if Aiden Ritchie would say the same thing about all the different basses he plays, because he's the bass guy. I'm not. And he does have strong opinions about the Bach 42. I just saw his recent video on that one, and the one he has, he really enjoyed. He thought he liked, and I've got a Bach 42, and for the reason I wanted it, which was it was just a really dark, creamy, smoky feel to it, and I like that above the 88H that I previously had. So I digress. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this entire video on the presentation of these. If I have more time in the future, I may break each individual horn down into its own video and review it more along the lines of some of the other YouTubers and talk to you about it. But a lot of these are really hard to find. It's hard to find an Argenta. I had two. After the Chicago Music Instrument Company bought Reynolds and Olds in the late 60s, by the time we got to the 1970s and they started sharing parts, the Argentas bore size dropped from 520 down to 515. And the Reynolds Medalist and the Reynolds Emperor were using the same Conn small bore 485 500 dual bore slides, where before they were just using a standard 500 bore slide. So, Reynolds and Olds, they've had their history. It seems like, Reynolds was the one that had to end up modifying a little bit down the line, but some of the horns that they produced then were actually pretty good, like the all nickel Reynolds Emperor. That was pretty neat. one Reynolds that I can't find that I really desire having my hands on. It was designed in the 50s, and it's the Reynolds Professional Sterling Silver. So that was their answer to the Silver Sonic Kings. But yes, they're solid sterling silver bells. Beautiful. I've only met one person who had one. I didn't have it in front of me because he lives somewhere else. He just showed me pictures. But it's just a horn that I'd really like to get my hands on and play and just see how it is. I don't need to own it, but it would be kind of cool. Anyway, so it's enough of that. I hope you enjoyed this. We will talk to you soon, and share my videos with your friends who are trombonists. Get them to subscribe. I think I'm at 466 now, almost to 470. I'm getting very close to that 500 number, which I'm looking forward to. Hopefully by June, which I don't think is going to be possible, but maybe July or August I'll get there. And then that'll be the first milestone for me. 1 year since I started the video YouTube channel was the beginning of June, middle of June actually. So anyway, talk to you later. Signing out from Ron's Trombone Shed.